I did want to go through a couple of your calls that you've had over the years.
I'm getting confused. What game are you calling?
I'm calling both games.
At the end of the game, I took my headset off and goes, you know, I stepped into what New York usually does. Usually New York is updating those plays. But it was happening so fast that there was no chance to go back to them, come back to us.
Every year before week 18, I do post that video just because it is so great. And I tell everybody, hey, this might happen today. You never know. Joining us today here on NFL Spotlight, he is one of the great voices in all of sports. This season is his 40th straight year calling NFL games. You hear him on CBS every Sunday, Westwood One Radio on Monday nights, NBA on TNT, and so much more. He's just a true legend. It is Kevin Harlan. Kevin, thank you so much for doing this. How's everything going?
All right, great. Thank you for having me. I'm privileged to be a part of your lineup and looking forward to a chance to visit with you. But all is great. We're in the middle of the NFL season. The leaves are turning, the temperature is changing, and we're getting to the best part of the NFL season right now.
Yep, this is right. End of the year, things change. It is the best time of the year right now. But before I start with all of this and talking about your journey, Kevin, I mentioned it in the introduction. This is your 40th straight year calling NFL games. If I told you coming out of college in Kansas that you would be doing 40 straight years of NFL football, what would have been your reaction if I told you that?
By the grace of God, that would happen is what I would have said. And I still feel the same way today that I felt back in 1985, my first year. The NFL is such a great sport with incredible people all over the league and beginning in the league office in New York. The people I've had a chance to meet and work with has enriched my life. My dad was in pro football for many years. Ran the Packers, won a Super Bowl. So I grew up around the NFL. I grew up on practice fields and in locker rooms. I was a ball boy for the Packers for multiple years. I charted offense during training camp, worked in the press box at Lambeau Field growing up. Got to watch big name broadcasters and writers that would come to Green Bay to cover that game. And I can't think of a more blessed life in terms of my career than being associated with the NFL. It has been a gift from heaven, and I don't think about that lightly. I hold it close to my heart. I feel incredibly lucky, full of gratitude, and love every Sunday and Monday night that I get a chance to broadcast this great game.
Well, you mentioned how you grew up in a football household with your father, Bob, being the former president and CEO of the Green Bay Packers, of course, the only team without an official owner. But how did your journey start where you wanted to do this? Was that always your goal as a child and eventually going into school and college? Well, how did this all start for you where I want to do this and call sports? And was football the number one choice in the beginning?
Football probably just fit because my dad was in it. My dad actually, before he went to the Packers, was with the St. Louis Cardinals, the baseball Cardinals, and was there for Bob Gibson. He was the PR director, the media relations director. And but he left that job in 1971. I was 10 and moved to Green Bay and became the assistant general manager. And so when we would go up to Green Bay, smaller town than St. Louis. But I will tell you that my first exposure to the National Football League occurred in front of a TV set. And when the Packers played the Chiefs in Super Bowl I, the narration was by John Facenda. Now, it gets a little blurry if I notice the game itself or if I notice the voice, but clearly they were married as one. And hearing Facenda narrate the highlights of Super Bowl I was to me, I was 6 years old, was to me, it was like what is this? What? And back then, there was not a lot of TV, but they played the highlights of this game. And in subsequent years, I heard the entire thing. But remember in front of the TV, watching that Facenda narrated highlight of Super Bowl one. So I think at that time something triggered, but probably at that age was not all that clear. When I was a kid in St. Louis, I would go with my dad to Cardinal Bay. My day was Sunday. So we go to church, we drive down to Busch Stadium, and my day to go with my dad to work was every Sunday in the summer when the Cardinals were at home. And I sat in the broadcast booth as I would wander around Busch Stadium and sat in the back of the KMOX broadcast booth where Jack Buck and Harry Carey were doing the games. So again, I heard these voices, saw what they did, but at that time, things were still kind of forming. Everything came together in Green Bay. I got to work in the press box, watch what these gentlemen did, writers and broadcasters, and covering this great game. There's something about an NFL stadium, and of course, I was in maybe the greatest Lambeau Field, that had such history and is such a great crowd base that combination with being in the box and seeing these guys work probably got me to my point of that is what I would like to do if I'm lucky enough. If I could make that a career, that would be pretty cool. Now, my dad was a journalism major, so he knew the ins and outs of reporting, of things that made good broadcasting or good journalism, and that helped build my base. And then one thing led to another. I started doing games in my bedroom at home with the sound turned down, broadcasting NFL games, Major League Baseball games, college basketball games. And then that led to my high school experience where high school had a radio station. I started doing things immediately there. And then one thing led to another. But that was my start, hearing the voice of Facenda, coupled with the grace and beauty and majesty of the NFL. And if I had to pick a spot, that was probably it back when I was 6 or 7 years old.
Well, everyone has that moment when they finally break into something. And of course, you did a bunch of different things out of college, but your first real NFL stint where you were at a place for a long time was doing Chiefs radio from 85 to 93. And eventually you end up getting to Fox. Now, the story of getting to Fox where they get the rights, it's a really cool story. And I kind of want you to say it over here because that was your real break into television. How did that all happen? And I believe it was standing on the football field and somebody called you over.
Yes, that's exactly right, Ari. I was getting ready to broadcast the AFC Championship game with Joe Montana as the Chiefs quarterback and Marcus Allen against Jim Kelly and that terrific Buffalo led offense and wonderful Buffalo Bill team. And every game I would go to the Chiefs locker room to do the pregame radio interview with Marty Schottenheimer, the late, great Marty Schottenheimer. And as I'm in Buffalo, you walk down a tunnel across the field and up the stands to get to the broadcast booth. And as I'm walking down the tunnel and headed across the field, I see Carl Peterson, our president and general manager, who is talking and walking with Steve Sable of NFL Films. And we're going to cross paths. And so I'm thinking, Steve Sable, wow. And here's my boss, Carl Peterson. Wow. So I walk there and it's right before the game and there's a lot of noise and commotion going on as there is before every NFL game. And Carl said, I was just mentioning you to Steve the other day. And then Steve told me this great story. Steve, tell him this story. And Steve Sable, as only he can, said, Fox called me the other day and asked me to give them, in my opinion, in Sable's opinion, the top 3 NFL radio play-by-play broadcasters. And somehow my name was in that group. And clearly, I'm speechless. Here's the legendary Steve Sable, my boss and a man I respect so much, Carl Peterson with the Chiefs. And he told me that. He said, I don't know where it's going to take you. This was January now. But I know that they are going to be calling you. And sure enough, they did. Marv Albert also put in a good word for me with the people that were putting together the broadcast teams. But Steve Sable's recommendation is what got me that job. And so as every contract would be renewed over the years, I'd send Steve just a very quick note. thanking him, telling him they're bringing me back. I did 4 years at Fox and have done now 20 whatever it is years at CBS. But without him, I wouldn't have gotten that job. And we all miss him in the NFL family, him and his father, who helped craft the Facenda narrated Super Bowl I highlight way back then. And his life goes in full circle. Here's his son, Steve, who Ed Sable did that back then. Steve was working for him. Here's Steve Sable giving me this great break. So I think of him off. I hear his voice often on NFL films. I'll see his name occasionally. And I think about, men like him that were gracious enough with their kind words to get me to this position I'm in today and have been in for a long time.
Yep, it's an incredible story, and regardless of what job you have, everyone has that story of a break where they're able to get in. And this NFL and really all sports, it's a people's business, and I'm sure that helped you out a lot when it came to that particular situation. But you mentioned doing radio and then going to do TV, and you do it now every single week, where you're doing Sundays with CBS and then Westwood One Radio on Monday nights. What is the art of calling a game on TV versus doing it on radio? Like, how different is it? And are there moments where maybe for a second you might forget which one you're doing? Does that even make sense? You know what I mean? Because it's such a different thing, whether it's on TV or doing radio.
That's a good question, Ari. I would say this. When I was doing the Chiefs in our old broadcast position, I could look through about 3 booths, all separated by glass. And I remember back then watching Al Michaels, do a game. And I noticed that during different times I'd glance over there, he was always looking at the monitor. And I read later where he said, why would I talk about anything other than what the viewer is seeing? So when you're doing TV, you're focused on that monitor 90% of the time. And you're constant. It's kind of like this. You're looking at the monitor, you're looking out at the field, you're looking at the monitor, you're looking at the field. Your eyes are dancing back and forth. But you rely on the monitor because that's what the viewer is seeing. Clearly in my mind, I hear Summerall, I hear Ray Scott, I hear Jim Simpson, I hear Don Criqui, I hear these great Dick Stockton, I hear these great majestic voices and the way they called pro football on television. And so I always kind of tuck that away in my head. Growing up, I used to listen as a kid to Lindsey Nelson doing Monday Night Football, to Jack Buck doing Monday Night Football on radio. And the words they used led me down the way that I do radio. Descriptive, good adjectives, good reporting, pace, tonality, all those things are so involved with radio. So to do TV for CBS on Sunday and then radio for Westwood One on Monday is not art, but it's an attempt to shift my brain from one way to do it to the other. It's still football, and each helps the other. My radio, I think, helps my TV, and my TV helps my radio. So they do join and are hand in hand. But I'd be lying if I said when I get on that airplane on Sunday night after my CBS Sunday afternoon game that I don't, all right, flush the TV, let's focus on radio. And the best way I do that is I stick in my game from the previous Monday night and get my radio cap on and start to get those principles which I use for radio. But each has complemented the other. It helps me that I've done so many games that my reactions are so not thought in advance, but just happen naturally. And that's what happens. Radio, you got to instantaneously act. TV, you can see a big play, but you can let it breathe, collect your thoughts, and then jump back in. So there is a difference between the two, accenting one. In fact, this year, here's what you mentioned before, my 40th year, every year I try to evolve. Every game I try to evolve and get better. And this year I've paid particular attention to being as efficient as I can on my TV call and make sure that I use crowd even more as orchestra to fill in those gaps. and make sure that I accent graphics and not read verbatim what the viewer can see. I've done this, but really points of emphasis, right? Every year, the NFL officiating department gives us points of emphasis. Well, these are my points of emphasis this year, really concentrating on efficiency so that there's more space for my analyst, more time for our sideline reporter, and more time for the graphics and all the fun things that these TV networks technically throw into a broadcast. And if I can be efficient but cover every base, that's my goal. And even more, letting the crowd speak and not extend calls on television. And then on radio, which I think is already the purest form of broadcasting. You need the delivery. You need the pacing and the cadence. You need the right words. You need to know the game. You need to pay attention to personnel. You need to have a feel for the moment while using the crowd and doing all these things. And so I always think of a person driving down the 101 in California or I-95 on the East Coast or across I-80 in the Midwest, and think of them by themselves in their car or truck or whatever, and trying to come up with the words that will show them in their mind's eye, the theater of their mind, what kind of catch it was, what kind of throw, what kind of duress was the quarterback under, what kind of run and where on the field. So I use all these things, and I love that challenge. It's the purest form of broadcasting. You're using everything you've got in your toolbox to try to make that radio call come to life. So last week in Kansas City, we have a blocked extra point, blocked field goal that could have won a game dramatically for the Denver Broncos. And a couple words were said, then let the crowd take it. And then on radio the next night, I was in Los Angeles doing Miami and doing the LA Rams. And there was a completely different set of things I had to use to try to make that game as indelible in the mind of the listener. So listen, I've got the greatest job in the world. The next night I was doing an NBA in San Francisco, and that was fun. And still I used parts of that into my NFL stuff and vice versa. So they all kind of go hand in hand, and the challenge is great. It's rigorous, but the challenge is great. And I love the business of broadcasting. And I love the fact that at this stage of my life, I'm able to do things that give me such joy. And this is a long answer. I'm sorry for that, but these are the things that I kind of hang on to as I'm away with my family, find the joy in being present for these great games and the honor of being in that chair. But at the same time, looking forward to going home and seeing my wife and our kids and our grandkids. So I am the luckiest person right now that I can think of, that I get a chance to do all of this and compact it into my schedule, which is incredibly gratifying.
I mean, getting to do sports as you're living is obviously a big blessing, and you get to do so much of it from, Sunday and Monday in basketball, from radio and TV and all of it. I did want to ask you, though, because there's a lot of other things that happen during the course of a week that the average fan doesn't see. It's not just show up to the game and call it. I'm curious to ask you about just production meetings and meeting people during the course of a week, whether it's the quarterback or the coach. You've done so many of them. Are there any specific people over the years that you've enjoyed being around the most, whether it's a quarterback or a coach, or any good stories that you've had throughout all of those meetings that you've had with NFL people?
I do find, Ari, that the coaches have become more guarded, more selective in what they'll tell you. For instance, last week we had Sean Payton, who I respect immensely, and he's so good with the media. And he said something in our meeting for the Broncos-Chiefs game earlier that week, and I wrote it down in the course of our conversation with our CBS crew. And I went back to him toward the end of that conversation. I said, Coach, I want to make sure I got this line correctly. And I read back the line, and he goes, that's just for the production meeting. That's not for air. That's just for the production meeting. And I said, okay, good. That's why I asked it. I wanted to be clear and make sure that we were on the same page. I would never want to defy any of your wishes. I would never want to reveal things that you told us for our benefit and not for the masses. And he goes, well, yeah, that's exactly right. I said, I said, well, good. So anyway, that's an example of how in depth we can get with these meetings. We can get stuff that he doesn't want said on the air, but that we know. And maybe when something happens, we can frame it and say, the feeling is, and it wouldn't go back to him. Now, we didn't get to this particular segment, but anyway, that we've got to respect the wishes. So there's an element of trust that is there with the people that we're meeting with, quarterbacks, coordinators, head coach, and on. So those meetings are good. Quite frankly, I only use it not for me to tell a story, but to know what's on the plate so that I can then spoon feed my analyst or our sideline person. And so I kind of feel my job is full as it is. Who's in, what's going on, report. Keep track of trends, and read my promos and get us in and out of breaks and set the scene. That's a lot right there. But knowing there's a story or three or four that I can lead and toss into my analyst, that's where these meetings become most important. So we find out a lot of times who's playing and who's not. A lot of times we don't. A lot of times they tell us the wrong information, but it's up to date and it may change in the course of 24 hours, and we give them that leeway. But the meetings are important, and I like to think that they enjoy it. But at the end of the day, their schedules are so immensely busy. They get in the facility at 6. They leave at 8. They're there all day. The last thing they probably want to do, and we all know this, is talk to us, talk to more media. They're dealing with the media every single day after every practice, sometimes multiple times a day. It never ends. And I get it, and they get it. It's part of the job. So I like to streamline my questions to some just kind of nuts and bolts stuff. And if there is something that interests me, and Bo Nix or with Andy Reid talking about a couple things, but in particular, since I brought up Peyton, visiting about Bo Nix to me is a fascinating story. He has had a Hall of Fame quarterback in Breeze. He has won a Super Bowl. He knows the position. He played the position as a replacement player in the NFL and as a college quarterback. So he knows this stuff so well. So I guess I'm very in tune to him and his perception, and him drafting Nix in a quarterback-filled first round. There's a lot there, a lot of intrigue, a lot of work that went into it, and he's got some interesting angles that he took to find out his guy, and I really found that interesting. So anyway, every coach has got a story. Belichick, just in a 15-second story, never wanted to talk about the game. Always talked about the opposition in very glowing terms, and loved history, loves pro football history. And that's what was always the best about Belichick, who's terrific in person, but was pretty guarded about his own team. And I don't blame him. I would be too.
Well, we're finally getting to see Bill open up now that he's doing media for at least 1 year. And it's been fun to see. I mean, we might be back in the sidelines next year and you'll be having more production meetings with him. But for 1 year, we get to see Bill Belichick opening up and saying what he really thinks in his head. All right. I did want to go through a couple of your calls that you've had over the years, and just 3 specific ones that I think are very memorable, and just to get your take on what happened throughout all of it and what you remember. Number 1 would be December 29, 2019. You're in Kansas City for Chiefs Chargers, and the Chiefs take the lead late. Meanwhile, over in New England, they're favored by a lot, and they fall behind to the Dolphins. You end up calling 2 games at once.
If the Chiefs win and New England loses, the Chiefs will be the 2 seed. They'll get the bye, and they'll have a home game the next weekend.
I'm getting confused. What game are you calling?
I'm calling both games.
What do you remember about that day in Kansas City, which of course had implications for the playoff bye coming up in a couple weeks?
Huge implications, yeah, for the Chiefs, who were looking for the bye. And it was last weekend of the season. We asked our people that set up our broadcast booth to they call it a net feed, a net return, and it's a monitor with just what CBS is sending to the country. And we had them dial in the Miami-New England game because it directly affected the Chiefs. So that was on the floor, and we look at that all the time when we get updates from New York on other games. So that was going on, and the Chiefs were moving, and they were coming. They're playing the Chargers. They were coming back, and it was a good game. But there was another good game that directly affected the Chiefs and what was going to happen in the upcoming playoffs, and that was trying to get a bye. So as our game is going on in Kansas City, that game is going on in New England, as you said, in Foxborough, and the Patriots are heavily favored. If they win, they're the number one seed. They get the bye, and they're playing at home against a team that they've mastered, the Dolphins. Ryan Fitzpatrick is quarterbacking that day in Miami for the Dolphins in Foxborough. And as the Chiefs are getting a grip on their game, I'm looking down, and that game is now getting close. And actually, Miami, late in the game, in a heavily underdog role, have a chance to take a lead with seconds left, and they're in the 10. They got a goal to go, and as that's going on, the Chiefs are scoring, and they're now completing a pass, and the Chiefs with the extra point, and they're scoring, and it was the timing of it all. And anybody in our business would have done the same thing. The Chiefs had a play, they had a play. Chiefs had a play, they had a play. So the sequence was perfect, and it worked out. And it just so happened that Fitzpatrick finds Mike Gesicki back of the end zone, under the crossbar, in stride, with a laser touchdown pass. Easy to call, right? I see Gesicki, I see Fitzpatrick, I see the play, and it happens right after the Chiefs have gotten this extra point to take a lead coming from behind, to take a lead against the Chargers, and the Patriots, who they're battling for this bye, have now fallen behind at home. Fans will watch other games on their phones, and that's what they were doing that day. And so as that was unfolding, the Chiefs had scored, the crowd is in full elation, and now they know that New England is trailing. And so consequently, the fans began to react. We had some very sharp people in our truck that were capturing that moment after the touchdown pass in Foxborough had been thrown, and it all made for it all came together. At the end of the game, I took my headset off and goes, I stepped into what New York usually does. Usually New York is updating those plays, but it was happening so fast that there was no chance to go back to them, come back to us. So we just called it off the monitor, which anybody would have done. And it worked out, and everybody was happy with it. And the Chiefs, as it turned out, won, got the bye. Patriots lost. They could have won the whole thing and had the number one seed, and they didn't get this. So anyway, it turned out well. It turned out well.
Well, the NFL purposely schedules Week 18 without any times for potential moments like those. And it happened exactly like that for you in that day. And every year before Week 18, I do post that video just because it is so great. And I tell everybody, hey, this might happen today. You never know. So it is one of my favorites. The other one, and I know this is a football show, but I think everybody likes March Madness. March 16, 2023, Furman versus Virginia. Did we just see what we think we just saw? What do you remember about that one and how it all unfolded?
Well, a good producer one time, and I'll say his name, Mark Wolf, who's at CBS as a consultant and has a Hall of Fame career, but no longer doing games weekly. Mark Wolf said, the best games for us in the truck and for you in the booth is to lose yourself in the game. Lose yourself. Don't worry about the noise, the crowd. Don't worry about, if you're cold or hot, whatever. He said, lose yourself in the game and the mechanics of what's going on in the game and your relationship with your analyst in the booth. And so I've always lived by those words, and it's always helped things come out organically. So I don't know where that line came from, quite frankly. It was a stunning upset. Virginia was trying to keep a lead going late in the game, and a Final Four starting point guard inexplicably threw a ball in the air as time is ticking down, which was intercepted by the underdog small school Furman Paladins. A pass, a shot, a three, a lead, and a huge upset in the tournament.
Clark in a straight checker. He needed to do that. He threw it away. Young, Pagos. Timeout, Virginia. Did we just see what we think we just saw? Wow.
But when the kid hit the three for Furman, I do not know where that line came from. I don't know where any of these lines, but I think I attribute it to I get lost in the game and kind of let whatever it is inside me come out. Sometimes it's been good. Sometimes it's not been good. That time it worked in that situation. And then CBS had shown a video of it, Ari, that I was holding my arms out for quiet. I do that. I did the other night, the other afternoon at Arrowhead, when the field goal was blocked by the Chiefs to preserve a win, a lead and a win, and to Trent Green, because the crowd is such a great, that like it's just Steph Curry hit a three that following Tuesday, a game I was doing, and in the NBA for TNT, and he hit a big three late in the game, and the crowd in full throat is just something that you cannot like. It's just so great, and it's part of why we love covering the sports we do and doing these games. And Vince Scully once said, "I use the crowd as orchestra." Another thing that is stuck in my head, and so that's what that holding my arms out. So let's let it breathe. A lot of times, these guys are coaches. They don't understand sometimes the elements of broadcast, but for whatever reason, it kicked in for me that moment. And this past Sunday in Kansas City, and the crowd didn't disappoint in either case. It rarely does in some of those big moments.
Yeah, letting the crowd do the talking sometimes is perfect, and I think you've mastered that. I did want to ask you about that particular situation where you mentioned it, having a camera on you while you're broadcasting. I mean, I think it's great. As somebody who's a New York Mets fan, we have that with Gary Cohn, who does a great job
Yes.
for us. I'm just curious, like, what do you think about having that where the fans get to see you doing it and your the play-by-play guy and the analyst just seeing your reactions as well?
I was asked this question after that Furman, Virginia video came out and was seen a lot. And I said at the time, I personally don't like it. And I guess I kind of stay with that. I understand what my bosses want to do at both TNT and certainly CBS. And it's up to their discretion, and they can use it the way they want. I guess I feel like I don't want it. I want this to come out the right way. I don't want it to be about the broadcasters. Maybe the words can complement what you see and enhance. That's the whole goal. But to show what the broadcasters felt and them going crazy, sometimes, Ari, you've got to physically, like when I was at Fox, Madden would always tell us this story about when he started at CBS, that, he was a guy that used his hands all the time, and he was demonstrative and animated. But they noticed when it was at CBS early on that maybe he didn't do that as much. Well, now we think of Madden like this, right? But back then when he was getting into broadcasting, he was probably a little bit nervous. He was a little bit more staid. He was a little bit more, kind of calm. But that's not John Madden. John Madden talks with his hands, and he wants to let those words come out like this, and look at that hit, and boink and doink and all this other, right? So when we call those games, I don't know how other broadcasters are, you sometimes have got to get physically and animated with your call, even though they're only hearing your words and not seeing you. But sometimes that's a little bit too much about the broadcaster and takes away from the moment. I'd like to think that your voice is the perfect complement to what you're seeing these great athletes do on a football field on a Sunday or Monday, and that's enough. And like the kid who shot for Furman, and the mistake by the Virginia guard, the turnover late in the game in a crucial intersection of that game, like, it wasn't about us, it was about them. And I guess I feel like I don't want it to be about our reaction. Big deal, It may be kind of fun for a broadcast nerd or somebody go, "Oh my God, look at those guys." But usually it doesn't have I don't know. I guess that's just more of an old school type feel. I'm not on social media, so I don't see these things. People have to send me stuff. My daughters will tell me stuff is on there. But I guess I kind of feel like let the moment should stand on its own. My words hopefully enhance the moment. That's enough, and not to see any theatrics, because a lot of times that stuff is I'm trying to find the right word, and like I said with Madden said it helped him get those emotions through his vocabulary out by doing all this stuff. He talks with his hands. He talked with his hands. He was that helped him become the legendary person that he was. I remember that conversation, as I do a lot of things. His teammate Pat Summerall for all those years. The spotting boards I use today are the same basic design that Summerall used, and he gave me his boards one time, his spotting boards, and I've adhered to those because number one, the respect I have for him, but it's the perfect way to put them together. I think guys do it differently. I have followed that, and it's helped me greatly.
Well, I'll tell you this much: there are many Kevin Harlan fans across the country, and we love to see the dedication you have to the job that you do, and just seeing it, the videos and the way you do it, and how seriously you take this, and how much you truly love it. We see it in the videos. That's what matters, and that's why we love it. It's not making it about you, but it's more just seeing the call and seeing how dedicated you are to the craft that you have and how well you've done it for so many years, Kevin. So that is, I think, where it's coming from. It's coming from a good place, and I think everyone truly loves it. So
I hope that's what my wife told me, and that's what my
yes.
bosses told me. I listen to my wife. I listen to my bosses, but internally, I'm a little uncomfortable with it. But I appreciate those kind words. You're nice to say that.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to wrap it up with the question that I ask every single guest that comes on this show. And there are so many more things that I could probably discuss with you, and maybe we'll do it at a different time whenever you are not as busy as you are right now with so many things going on. We ask this question to every guest. This is the NFL Spotlight Show. We love spotlighting people in the NFL, in the industry, who deserve more recognition. It could be a player, a coach, an executive, outside the box, whatever you're thinking. Who do you think, Kevin, should be in this seat in the future?
Well, I said off the air as we were talking before we started that I thought I had a name, and now because it's fresh in my mind, so I guess I'll say it, but I guess I'll lead you to the person I really think you should have here, who would be great. And I think Dave Taub, the special teams coach of the Chiefs. I think special teams is and now we got the dynamic kickoff, which has involved a whole different way of thinking. And these special team coaches have had to kind of twist their minds around a little bit to figure out how this works and what is best. So much comes down to returns and kicks and punts and placement and blocked field goals, as we saw at Arrowhead, recently. So I think he is a genius at what he does, and his attention to detail is off the charts. So I think he would be terrific. He is known in NFL circles, probably known by the even casual NFL fan. He's had an incredible Hall of Fame career. Spagnuolo the same way. Listen, Sean Payton would be great. Here's why I tell you Peyton Manning and who was an obvious thing, but maybe for reasons that are different. Peyton Manning changed the quarterback position, I think, forever, with the way he controlled the game in the gun. He controlled the pace. He controlled what the defense could do. He maneuvered his own pieces on his side of the football. And Ari, you know these stories because you've covered the league. His attention to the smallest element made him who he was. From Friday practices with a cameraman at the opposite end of the field, focused only on his eyes so that he could work on not leading a receiver or leading a defensive back with where he was going to go with the pass so that he could use his eyes to throw them off. How he would, these are just two small stories, but how he would, during training camp, tape the NFL Network's coverage of training camp at other cities during July and August practices.
Wow.
That he would go back and watch and maybe pick up something how he would watch TV copies of games to listen to cadence or defensive calls if he could ever pick them up on the network broadcast audio. Like, this guy took that position to a whole nother level, armed with 3-4 plays in his head every time he broke huddle, and how much tape the notebooks he wrote in. Like, I could go on and on and on. And to find a person in any profession that took it so seriously that he would do all these little things, which blossomed into a Super Bowl champion twice, 2 different teams, Hall of Fame career, and as revered a quarterback as this game has ever seen, I think he would be, but not talking about his broadcast and his funny stuff, talking about the art of quarterbacking, having him visit with your knowledgeable questions and leads on how he took that position and really changed the game. I think he changed the way the position is played, the way the game is called, the way the coaches see the game in tape. What he did resonates. It took a lot of work, massive amounts of hours every single week. And every offseason, while it may not have been more on his body, it was about his mind and his eyes and the way he processed things. The most fascinating, honest guy I think we ever talked to was Peyton Manning. And I watch him now, and I feel like, are we getting what really made him special? He's got a great sense of humor, very telegenic. He's a comfortable watch and listen. But for him to break down that position and maybe even share with you some secrets in the way he prepared, I think that would be must watch, much listen to, TV, podcast, whatever, interview. That would be, I'd pay to watch that, believe me, and listen to that conversation, because I just was given a glimpse. And to this day, I think about the way he went about it with almost perfection at the most difficult position to play in any sport.
Well, one of my favorite NFL film stories is Ed Reed for weeks purposely played something wrong because he knew he had to play Peyton Manning in week 8 or something like that, because he knew Peyton Manning would see it on TV. So I would see it on film, sorry. So he was ready for it. And of course, when they played each other, he made the right switch and intercepted Peyton Manning. But that's how much respect Peyton had around the league. And it's one of my favorite stories. And we'll definitely try to get him. And Dave Taub is a great answer as well. We had Chris Shea, who's the lead negotiator in Kansas City, last week, and we're going to have a Chiefs player on over here in the coming weeks. And he also mentioned we should get Rick Burkholder, who is their lead medical guy. So there's a lot of people in Kansas City. So both answers are great, Kevin.
They are at such an elite level. I was on a show before we did this, and I said it's like the Matrix movies with Keanu Reeves, right? It's like when the bullets are flying and he in slow motion is going like this and they whiz right by his ear. And then he moves like this. Another bullet goes like, that's where the Chiefs are right now. Like, they see the game through such a different lens than any other team in pro football. They're playing winning football, which is maybe the most nebulous thing to try to get. You can talk about tackling, catching, like all the statistical things were all floating around our heads. At the end of the day, they've achieved a degree and a level that really hasn't been seen since the dynastic times of the Patriots. You can go back to the Cowboys at 3-4, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, Green Bay. Like, those teams saw the game through a different lens. And that's where the Chiefs are right now. They are winning games they shouldn't. They're winning because they're smart, their attention to detail, like they're doing these things that are so great. And but it's in slow motion. And we all know that when we hear quarterbacks say all the time, well, the game is really slowing down. When it slows down, boo, 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 you're like you can just, you're throwing darts. And it's like, yeah, that guy's open and that guy's in stride and that guy's got that little window to get the ball. Like it just, you see it differently. And that's where the Chiefs are right now. With every injury, major, and they just lost their kicker for a month, maybe more. Like they find a way. And it's not because of, it's all the hard work and everything, but the game right now for them is being framed by Andy Reid and the Dave Taubes and the Steve Spagnuolos in such a way They believe in the game plan they're getting. They don't veer from their lane. They see the game in slow motion, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. They're a special product. They definitely are. And as football fans, we should enjoy, even though it's not this bombastic barrage of numbers and statistics and 400-yard passing games and all this, they're winning in such a way that almost transcends the way we're all brought up to see the game and appreciate the game. It's art. It really is. And I've seen them 3 straight weeks now in Las Vegas, Monday night against who they play Monday night? Tampa Bay, and Mayfield's playing well, and then Sunday at Arrowhead against Denver. So anyway, a long answer. We've gone way over it, and I'm sorry about that. But yeah, Peyton Manning, my suggestion, Peyton Manning, I think, talking about the game and the job of quarterbacking would be, I think, a fascinating conversation.
Yep, we'll definitely work on it. Kansas City, special team, special organization. You did their games on the radio. It's where eventually you got your big start, eventually to get into Fox and eventually to CBS. And I believe you live in Kansas City during the season as well.
I do.
It's pretty cool
yes.
that all the other 31 teams are trying to emulate that organization and that team right now. And we are definitely going to work on getting those 2 guys as guests here for the show. Kevin, I really want to thank you for coming on, sharing all the stories, the journey, your calls, everything in between. There's so much more that we didn't even get to. I mean, your daughter is doing this. You got to do a game with her, which is really cool. You've done 14 consecutive Super Bowls. Your day-to-day schedule I wanted to get into. We'll definitely try to do this again and get into deeper conversations about the business as well. There's so much that I could talk to you about, but Kevin, I really appreciate you taking the time here today, spotlighting everything, and continued success with everything that you do.
My privilege, Ari, to be on with you. Thank you for the chance to visit, and I hope we cross again down the road sooner than later, but thank you very much.
Special thanks to Kevin Harlan for being our spotlight guest of the week. I'm not even kidding. When he initially joined the Zoom call, I got some jitter just from hearing his voice because it's just so exciting. One of the great voices in all of sports, and how it all started, how it all happened for him finally breaking in and doing TV on Fox. It's a relationships business, as we all know by now. Knowing a few people talking about you. Eventually, he gets to start at Fox, moves over to CBS, and of course, he has had some of the greatest calls we've had in sports, regardless of which sport it is. And like I told him at the very end, I plan on having Kevin Harlan back here on the show at some point when his schedule gets a little bit not as crazy. Like we know he's doing Sunday football, Monday football, basketball for TNT, and much, much more. A lot of travel involved, production meetings, everything. The fact that he made time for us was really, really special, and I have so much more to talk to him. So hopefully in the off season, once things quiet down, I intend on bringing Kevin Harlan back on here to talk about so much more with him, because it was a joy to have him on here and to spotlight his career and everything he has done in sports now for over 40 years.